Welcome everyone. My name is Kevin DeWalt, founder of So Helpful, and today I'm joined with Brian Jordan, a friend and the founder of Coding for Interviews. I'm going to ask Brian a little bit about how he got started building his amazing community, how being helpful is a part of his strategy for creating evangelists within his community, and to help give you any advice for how you can actually use helpful as a strategy for building your business. So Brian, thank you so much for joining us.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
And you're in San Francisco still?
Yep, that's right. Here in San Francisco. It's some nice foggy weather today, as usual.
Yes, a little bit better than the smog we're having in Beijing, but
That's true. That's true. Different sides, I guess.
exactly. So, Brian, first of all, just congratulations on what you've done for Coding for Interviews. It is just, people rave about what you're doing. For those of you who are not familiar with the newsletter and why you created it, can you just tell us a little bit about your story, why you created Coding for Interviews, kind of what the newsletter's about, and the kind of people that read it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so Coding for Interviews is a weekly programming practice newsletter I started about a year and a half ago. I started it out, it's basically, so each week I send out a programming interview practice problem, and then the community of readers, up to like 15,000 readers now, a number of them will send back responses. So they'll code up a programming interview solution that week, email it to me, and then I'll send it back out to the group. And so I've kind of over the years, it's kind of grown to include other stuff like a programming practice problem repository, a video course I put together earlier this year. Yeah, that's basically it. It's a community of people interested in this weird aspect of programming interviews, which is that you have to practice these coding problems that you don't normally do on a day-to-day basis.
So was that your inspiration for doing it? Is you found that great programmers were just bombing interviews because they weren't ready to answer the right problems? Was that it?
Yeah, to a degree. Yeah, so I would when I was kind of back when I was starting a job a couple of years ago, I was kind of thinking I wanted to do a side project, and I'd heard that you're supposed to kind of do it based on what people ask you about. And so thinking back, after I had just graduated school and prepared for a couple interviews, people were asking me about, like, oh, I have an interview coming up. I heard that you did, prepared for interviews. Like, what do I do? I have no idea what to do. Like, there are all these resources online and practice problems, and so there was like a common thing I was getting asked by a few different friends, and I would write up long screeds in the GChat windows, and then they'd go to their interviews and say, hey, these two pieces of advice were super helpful. Like, it totally made the difference. They ended up getting some good jobs. So I was like, okay, I guess, it's kind of a boring topic, right? It's like, it's one of those things that you
well, it's not boring if you're the guy going in for the interview the next day.
Right.
That person is
Exactly.
the most important thing in their life.
Exactly. So when you want to know it, it's like, there's this like intensity of, I need to know this immediately.
Now.
Like I'll keep taking any information. I'll, try to find anything. So it's definitely, it's a fun community because it's, when people enter it, they're like, oh God, they're so open to everything and they really want to learn the stuff, which is kind of a cool little niche to have, I think.
Absolutely. Well, great. So, and then so you have the newsletter. Do you also offer? Are the courses like paid courses that you offer? Are there the paid products you have on top of that?
Yep. So kind of what happened was the mailing list started growing and growing, and I started the mailing list fees became kind of high. Like it got pretty expensive. So I was like, oh God, I gotta, I figure it's a good thing. There's probably a reason they can charge this much for mailing list fees. So I figured there must be some ability to recoup the cost there. So I tried stuff like Amazon, like Amazon affiliate links. I tried like straight up newsletter advertising. But it sounded like the best thing to do was to offer a product that people would find most helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Some people suggested books. Some people suggested some sort of online service. So then I went to the community basically, and this is right about the time when I found So Helpful, to try to figure out what people wanted. So that was the next step was like, maybe I'll try to figure out what people want before trying out more things.
Right.
So
Great. Okay. So let me just sort of leading, I guess maybe leading into the next question I have is, and so so you had the newsletter going up, and you were trying to figure out, how do I how do I pay for, whatever, how do I pay the fees for this, and possibly
Right.
turn this into more than just an expensive hobby, which a
Right.
lot of our startups are. So it sounds like the question you needed was to get insight more than anything on what people would pay for. So
Right.
how did being helpful dovetail into figuring out what people needed?
Right. So I initially basically I wanted to start talking with customers, uh, and so actually it was through talking with another so helpful person, Justin Wilcox, that I
Yeah.
actually came across so helpful, and he also gave me the advice on, if you're trying to put together a product, you should go talk to your customers first, interview them, and he had some great resources, the perfect resources for what I needed then on how to interview customers and stuff like that. And so I actually signed up for a So Helpful account just to be able to kind of kind of reach out to my newsletter subscribers and schedule times with them to chat with me. So when I first started with So Helpful, it was kind of abusing the platform to have my readers help me figure out what I wanted to make and what their struggles were and stuff like that.
So how did that work? Did you basically say what was your offer to them? Was it like, hey, can you grab 30 minutes to me? I'd like your advice, or what was the how did you sort of frame that up?
Yeah, so at that point I had done a few like survey kind of survey Google form type surveys
Hmm.
out before. So I'd done that quite a few times. So that's actually kind of how I started the mailing list, was just I put up a Google form saying, hey, I've been sending out these problems for my friends, for a couple friends, like is anyone else interested? And so I found those are like a pretty valuable tool for just collecting kind of like
Yep.
interested parties and stuff. So I would kind of continually send out here and there like, what do you guys think would be a good idea to, help monetize the list, help pay for the mailing list fees? And people said, oh, maybe like job listings or like advertisements or donations. For a brief period, I took donations, uh, and so at the end of some of those, I would say, another as kind of offer a call to action at the bottom. Say, would you be interested in chatting with me about this sort of stuff over a Skype call? Would you be
Right.
interested in reviewing newsletters early? And so I kind of had a list of something like 100 people who had said, I'm interested in chatting about this sort of stuff more.
Excellent.
And so then I emailed all of them with a link to the So Helpful to
Got
my
it. And
So
so then
Helpful.
they responded, grabbed some time with you. Excellent. Okay,
Right.
great, excellent. And so then okay, so you started having those conversations, and how did those conversations turn into the insight on what to build? Like, what was the nature of what you talked about? How did that sort of play itself out?
It was what I'm remembering most was the terror of first thinking, oh my God, I'm going to go talk to people on the phone. Like, this is crazy. Like, it's just terrifying. I'm going to go talk to someone on the internet.
It was
I'm
terrifying
like,
for you, or
oh yeah, oh yeah. Just thinking of like going to like chat with someone one on one who's like, you've been doing this thing for a while that's like this kind of like semi-anonymous. These are people who
yeah,
are like, my fellow redditors, my fellow hacker newsers, and sometimes you hear some terrible stuff online coming from the most anonymous of the group. So you kind of
right,
expect like, oh, my first call is going to be like this person's going to be railing on me for, oh, like
yeah,
all the like negative thoughts that are in the back
yeah.
of your head are like you figure someone else is probably going to say them immediately when you talk to them on the internet over the
Right.
video.
Yeah,
So
exactly. What kind of crazy guy is going to schedule time with me? I don't know these people
right,
yet.
yeah, exactly. It's like who's the first person going to schedule time with me? You figure it would be the most vocal critic, but in reality, it ends up being like the exact opposite. And that's I
Yeah,
think the most unexpected thing for me was like the people I end up chatting with are like the people that don't even like I don't even realize are out there that they're just
yeah.
so passionate about the stuff they're going to schedule a time to chat with me. Um, yeah. So then I kind of followed some of Justin's advice. I think I found some of your advice very helpful as well about running customer interviews, kind of
Hmm.
making sure not to prescribe a solution to them or
Yeah.
pre-sell the solution too much. So that was really helpful, and so I was able to actually from those calls collect a lot of great like just like lists of like exact phrasings of this is my problem, this is why the current solutions suck, you know, this is why they're not, why they're not so great, what would be better, and like what sort of stuff they value. So it was very helpful. So I ended up being able to take that sort of information and use it when both formulating my product and, presenting the product to the customers.
Yeah, it's your situation is really interesting because I mean you basically started out by being helpful. Like before, like that was
Right.
that was the mindset you brought to this with your newsletters. So it
Right.
was like
Right.
it was you were like that was so I mean I guess I wouldn't even say how does being helpful fit into your strategy, but that is your
Right.
strategy, right? I mean,
Right. Right. Yeah, it doesn't fit in. It like
it is it.
it's how did I it's how did I build it. It's really like I think being helpful is I've been sold on it. It's great. It's a great way to both start and kind of throughout the whole life cycle of a business. I think.
Well,
This
I've
is my
read.
first one, so I don't really know.
Well, I've sort of I've read the comments on Reddit, and Reddit does not, and Reddit and programmers especially are not exactly the softest, warmest audience out there, and it's clearly
Right.
these people have obviously, these people are really passionate about what you're doing. You've obviously really impacted a lot of people's lives in a positive way. So, congratulate. I think what you've done is a model for how to build an enthusiast community around something you care about. So I guess maybe so get closer to wrapping things up. So I think we've talked about you and I've talked about before over like how this has actually created evangelists within your own community. So I look at it as saying 15,000 people in a newsletter. I mean, that's for an individual. That's not a small number of people, especially when it's around a focused, valuable community. I mean, you're not doing news alerts on Justin Bieber. This is this
Right.
are like professionals trying to solve a real problem, and that's pretty valuable. Why help them one-on-one versus just shooting them emails and doing SurveyMonkey? Like, what's the value in that kind of interaction?
Yeah. So I definitely think when it comes down to people have very individual problems often. So kind of from their perspective, they have specific kind of things they're wondering about that aren't really Googleable. I have this specific situation with my boss. Is it okay to like tell them, can I leave or that sort of thing? So I
Right.
think from that perspective, just helping them, it's like at the end of the call, they'll be like, this was the most like helpful thing ever. Like, I can't believe it. So just from the value creation aspect of things, like forgetting whatever I'm getting out of it, whatever, Coding for Interviews is getting out of it, just like value creation in the world, I think one-on-one help can make a huge difference and just be worth it, period. It's like I happen to have heard a lot of these stories from people, and now from doing all these calls, I now know what other people have done in situations, what worked for them, what didn't work for them.
Yeah.
So now I'm just kind of like a repository of here, I'll share with you what I heard before, and for people that's like very helpful. Kind of, I'm now just the integrator of other people's experiences.
It's funny. It's like you don't even have to be the expert. In fact, it's often
Right.
if you just listen to people and help them think through it, then
Right.
you can't help but become the expert. It's like when I'm meeting with entrepreneurs and they say, "Well, oh my God," I said, "Well, this is the problem you're probably going to run into in 6 months." Like, "Oh my God, how did you know that?" It was like, well, I'd have to be. Some other dude asked me the same question.
Yeah. Came back 6 months later.
Exactly. So
Right.
I'd have to be. I'm not a genius. I'd have to be an idiot not to know. Right.
Right.
So
It's valuable both for them and for me, it's helping me get more valuable experience. Helping people out, hearing stories.
yeah.
So that alone I think is very helpful. On top of that, I've made a number of I've made some in-person friends now. So I have like people who have become they'll contribute to the open source programming practice problem repository. When they come to visit San Francisco, I'll meet up with them.
Wow.
There's a guy who it turns out lives down the street, and we get breakfast every couple weeks. It's like I've made some good friends, and they just so happen to be obsessively interested in the same thing I am. So it's like it's pretty cool.
Well, Brian, that's amazing. Congratulations. So I guess just to wrap things up, there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of entrepreneurs who are struggling to get started just to figure out how to build an audience, and they're trying to figure out, how do I get people to pay attention to what I care about? How do I find other people who are passionate about what I am? If you had to talk to one of those people, it's kind of where you were 18 months ago. What advice would you offer them?
Yeah, and so it's funny is like this is the kind of advice that I offer friends now. If if they're like, what should I do? I kind of want to work on my own project. I'd say, yeah, start by giving out free help. Basically, it's a great way to start building your expertise, build a name for yourself, build a community of both potential customers and potential coworkers. It's just a great way to get started because who's going to turn down free help? There's nothing wrong with it. It's all upside. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, sure. And then for you, it's all upside as well. It's just a great way to get started and it also kind of grounds what you're doing. You're going to be working on very realistic stuff.
Yeah.
You're going to find out what people actually are having trouble with. You won't spend, months working on something that no one cares about because, every day you're talking with people who are saying, this is my problem. What do I do?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, maybe I'll set aside playing around with my Bootstrap template for a second and figure out, what I
they
should
care
try
about.
to study. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Brian. I really appreciate it. So for people that want to get a hold of you, it's codingforinterviews.com is the newsletter. That's where they can learn how. Okay, excellent. And if they want one-on-one help on preparing for an interview or ways that I guess so the one-on-one help you provide is it mainly around preparing for interview, or is it more like as your career as a programmer?
It ends up being a little bit of both. Oftentimes I'm open to do whatever. That the other thing, if someone wants to ask me about game development, that's fine too. But it's usually it's like they'll come in and say, here's my situation. What do how do I become a better programmer in the long term? How do I prepare for this interview in the short term?
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so helpful me / Brian Jordan. Is that correct?
That's right.
We'll put it in the notes.
Perfect.
Thanks a lot, Brian. Really appreciate your time.